Good afternoon, Madam President.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
We're going to talk about pensions a little bit here.
Okay.
The City of Atlanta's pension plans, not unlike a lot of other plans, are currently underfunded, meaning there's unfunded liability for the 3 pension programs that you have. Right now, it's right about $1 billion. If you were to become mayor, what would be your ideas about actually filling that gap of the unfunded liability?
Thank you, Commissioner. Good to see you here. Let me qualify your statement. It's $1.3 billion. Unfortunately, we have not funded our pension on an ongoing basis for a very long time, not just in this last administration, but I want to be clear about our obligations. Our city employees do not participate in the Social Security system, so they only have one revenue stream that comes into them after they retire. If they are fortunate enough to have saved, they have a little bit more, but not so much more. And so we have an obligation as a city to make sure that they retire responsibly. When I think about the pension plans that we have, I understand that we need to get more revenue into the city so that we can fund them. But the first thing I think we have to do is evaluate the plans as they stand today and try and determine if they are economically sustainable. They have moved from $36 million in 2002 to $100 million in 2008. That's about 15% of the general fund, and I would tell you that doesn't seem to be sustainable, so that's number one. Number two, what I think we need to do is evaluate our investment strategy and see if the pension plans are actually generating enough income so that they can support the payments that are outstanding and ongoing. Number three, I think we need to look at the basics and see if we need to rejoin the Social Security system, because that would generate a second or perhaps a third revenue stream, depending on if folks have small savings of their own. And last but not least, I return to we need more revenue in the city of Atlanta. We are constrained by 2 revenue streams, property taxes and sales taxes, like many of the cities all across the state of Georgia, analogous to a 2-legged stool. So I submit that it's a fundamentally flawed business model that we've got to correct. That will not only help pensions, that will help the entire operation of the city of Atlanta.
Okay. The city also has an ordinance where the pension fund should be fully funded by 2024. Based on those revenue sources that you're looking at, which I want you to speak a little bit toward what those revenue resources will be, do you think you can actually fund that unfunded liability by 2024? And second part of that question, if not, what does that mean for the employees who are in the fund or coming out of the fund, and what does that mean for taxpayers?
Thank you very much for that. No, we cannot complete that obligation by 2024. If my math serves me correctly, $1.3 billion, it would be an astronomical payment on an ongoing basis. So there is no way that we can complete it by 2024. I think what we have to do, if we evaluate the plans that we have today, we have 2 groups of employees. Those who were hired before 2001, January 1st, and our police and fire are in a defined benefit plan. We have an obligation to those folks. State law and case law, I should say, stipulates that we can't change a benefit once it has been earned, and so we can't change those. But prospectively, we now have a defined contribution plan, and all employees who are currently working in that class and those who are hired in the future will be in the defined contribution plan. But I think there are a couple of things we can do. We can look at the parts of the plan and indicate or find ways to ratchet back some of our obligations on an ongoing basis. And so I would say that we could change our vesting schedule from 10 years back to 15 years. We can reduce our multipliers that are at 3% to 2.5%, and we can return to the Social Security system so that we don't have so many liabilities across the plans as we do today, because it is just not sustainable on an ongoing basis.
Okay. In 2004, the Pension Committee actually made some recommendations, some of those that you just spoke to as far as the vesting and also the multiplier. In 2005, those were increased to today's 10-year vesting period, and then also the multipliers.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that the Pension Committee actually recommended was a more rigorous administrative process, similar to what the state has, in reviewing the pension plans for 2 years before you actually make a decision. What would you do in reference to how those pension plans are reviewed in the future to make sure what the city just did in 2005 is not repeated going forward?
Well, clearly the information, or I shouldn't say clearly, let me restate, the information that the council received and that I received in 2005 when those adjustments were made was that the city could handle it. And I think in retrospect, it would have been much better to have taken the time to do a really rigorous analysis as to whether we really could handle it with fire, police, the general employees. It would have been much more helpful to have the opportunity to go through the numbers very, very carefully and understand what the impact was going to be for current as well as for future obligations. So I, for one, tend to measure twice and cut only once. So I would want to take the time, it might be more than 2 years, to actually analyze what the changes might do to our plans and to our responsibilities on an ongoing basis.
Oftentimes, when we talk about employee pensions, that's all we talk about is the pension plans. Typically, employees want to see compensation benefits in addition to pension. Defined benefit, of course, is not a best practice everywhere right now. What are some other things that you would want to see happening in the city for the city of Atlanta employees to help morale, to help compensation, and to help their benefits?
Well, I think what we have to look at, we obviously have the traditional benefit of health care in the city of Atlanta, but I think we need to look for performance incentives. I'd like to pay people for their experience and their expertise and their education. But when we think about the employees who are already there, they have told us from time to time that the performance measures that we have in place are not clear. So we need to be very clear about setting objectives, communicating the objectives, measuring the objectives, and then rewarding people when they achieve those objectives. So giving them performance measures and having clear indication of what they are and how they will be measured will be very important for morale in the future.
Great, thank you.